Welcome back, everybody, for another deep dive. This time we're tackling a topic I think we can all relate to: friendship. Now we've got some great excerpts from a text called The Dynamics of Friendship, a comprehensive overview. It really gets into all the nitty-gritty of what makes these relationships tick.
Yeah.
But before we get into all that, I want you to think about your own closest friends. How did those relationships even begin? Have they changed over the years? You might be surprised how much those changes actually mirror what's going on in our own lives.
That's true. Friendship, it isn't static. It evolves right alongside us through different chapters and experiences.
So let's start with those early chapters, shall we? We're talking childhood, the playground days. What's the driving force behind those very first friendships?
Well, think about a playground for a second. Kids gravitate to whoever's closest and whoever's doing something that looks fun. Shared activity, proximity, that's the name of the game when you're little. It's simple, but then we grow up and things get a bit more complex.
So it's like those early friendships are almost like a training ground for more complex relationships later on.
Exactly. And then you hit adolescence and it's like someone flipped a switch. Peer groups become hugely important. All of a sudden, there's this added layer of social pressure and, let's be honest, jealousy.
Oh, the teenage years. Intense emotions, intense social dynamics.
Yeah.
Why is jealousy such a big factor at that stage?
Well, think about it. Teens are trying to figure out who they are, right? And those peer groups offer a sense of belonging and validation, but that also makes them super vulnerable to social comparison. The more defined those social circles become, the greater the potential for feeling like you don't quite measure up or like you're being left out.
Oh, that makes sense. And then you throw social media into the mix, and I imagine that just amplifies everything, right?
Oh, absolutely. Social media is like everyone's broadcasting this carefully curated version of their life. And it's hard not to compare yourself, especially when you're a teenager and your self-esteem is already a bit fragile.
So how do we navigate that? I mean, social media isn't going anywhere, and those teenage years are kind of inevitable. Is it all just a recipe for drama and heartache?
Not necessarily. It's about awareness and open communication. Encourage teens to be mindful of how social media is making them feel. And as parents, we can model healthy social media habits ourselves and have those conversations about comparison and inadequacy. It's not about demonizing social media. It's about using it in a way that supports healthy relationships.
That's some really helpful advice. Sure. Now, as we transition into adulthood, those friendships, they take on yet another form, right? What are some of the big shifts that happen during this stage?
Well, life gets complicated. Careers, romantic relationships, starting a family, all these new demands pop up. Friendships have to adapt. They require more effort, more intentionality to really maintain those connections.
Yeah, and it's so easy to let them slip away when you're juggling so many different responsibilities. But even with all that added complexity, those friendships, they still remain incredibly valuable.
Absolutely. The benefits of friendship run deep even in adulthood. They provide emotional support, a sense of belonging, help us manage stress. Studies even show strong social connections are linked to better physical health and even living longer.
Wow, so friendships are literally good for our well-being.
Exactly. But like any relationship, they come with challenges. Conflict, disappointment, sometimes even betrayal. It's all part of the human experience, unfortunately.
So let's dive into that a bit. Why do even good friendships sometimes go sour?
Well, one common reason is conflicting values or expectations. As we grow and evolve, our priorities and beliefs can shift. Sometimes those shifts align with our friends and the relationship deepens, but sometimes those differences create friction and can lead to drifting apart.
Almost like growing in different directions.
Exactly. And then there's communication breakdowns, unresolved conflicts, unspoken resentments. Those things fester and erode the foundation of a friendship.
And I imagine those breakdowns are even more likely when people are already busy and stressed, which is pretty much the default setting for most adults.
It's true. It takes a conscious effort to prioritize communication, especially when we're juggling so much. But those conversations are crucial. They allow us to address misunderstandings and hurt feelings before they become major rifts in the relationship.
And of course, there's betrayal, which I think is probably the most painful way a friendship can end. Is there a way to truly heal from that kind of hurt?
Healing takes time. It takes self-compassion. You have to acknowledge the pain and allow yourself to grieve the loss of that friendship. Talking to a therapist or a trusted friend can be incredibly helpful in processing those emotions and gaining some perspective.
So it's about acknowledging the hurt, but also focusing on those positive relationships that are still in your life.
Right. And recognizing that betrayal, while incredibly painful, can also be a strange opportunity for growth. It can teach us about our own needs, our boundaries, and what we truly value in our friendships.
So it's like those difficult experiences ultimately make us wiser and more resilient in the long run.
Exactly. Now, on a lighter note, let's talk about something that I think a lot of listeners might resonate with. That feeling of having too many close friends. Is that even possible?
Oh, I've definitely been there. You know that feeling when your social calendar is bursting at the seams? But is there really such a thing as having too many best friends?
Well, it's not about a specific number. It's more about managing those relationships effectively. Having a lot of close friends can be amazing, but it also requires a lot of bandwidth.
Okay, so what do you mean by bandwidth in this context?
Think of it as your capacity to nurture and maintain those relationships. Close friendships require time, energy, emotional investment. It's like juggling. You can only keep so many balls in the air at once.
So even though it might feel good to have this huge circle of close friends, it could actually end up hurting those relationships if you're spreading yourself too thin.
Exactly. It's not about closing yourself off to new connections, but it's about being mindful of your capacity to truly invest in those relationships. It's about quality over quantity, as they say.
It's not about shutting people out, but just being realistic about how much you can truly give to each relationship.
Exactly. And that brings up a good point. How do we even identify those truly valuable friendships? The ones that really bring joy and support to our lives.
What sets those true friendships apart from the rest?
Well, there's no magic formula, but I think some key ingredients are things like mutual respect, shared values, and a willingness to show up for each other through thick and thin. It's about having that deep sense of understanding and acceptance, knowing you can be your authentic self without judgment.
It's like that feeling of being truly seen and heard, flaws and all things. But these deep connections, they don't just magically appear, do they?
Not usually. They require effort, time, consistent nurturing. Building trust and intimacy takes time. It involves navigating bumps in the road. Conflicts are going to arise. Misunderstandings will happen. But it's how we handle those challenges that determines the strength and longevity of the friendship.
So it's not about avoiding conflict altogether, but more about learning to communicate effectively and working through those disagreements.
Exactly. Which leads us to another interesting aspect of friendship deception. Why do even close friends sometimes lie to each other?
That's always puzzled me. Isn't honesty supposed to be the foundation of any strong relationship? What's the motivation there?
Human behavior is complicated, and sometimes those lies come from a place of wanting to protect ourselves or our friend. Maybe we avoid sharing something hurtful, or we downplay our own accomplishments so our friend doesn't feel bad.
So the intentions might be good, but it sounds like that kind of deception can ultimately backfire.
It often does. Even small lies can erode trust and create distance. And then, of course, there are times when the deception is more calculated, driven by jealousy, insecurity, or even a desire for personal gain.
That's tough.
Yeah.
How do you deal with that kind of betrayal in a friendship?
Well, first acknowledge the hurt. Allow yourself to process those emotions. It's okay to feel angry, betrayed, confused. Talking to a therapist or even just a trusted friend can help sort through those feelings.
So it's about grieving that loss of trust, but also recognizing that healing is possible.
Exactly. And sometimes that healing involves having an honest conversation with the friend who betrayed you. It might not always lead to reconciliation, but it can offer closure and a chance for both people to learn from what happened.
Those conversations are so difficult, but I can see how they could be valuable for setting boundaries and rebuilding trust, whether in that friendship or in future ones.
Absolutely. Now let's shift gears for a moment and talk about the opposite of betrayal, those moments of true connection, and support those times when our friends really show up for us. What are some of the signs of a truly supportive friendship?
I think for me, it's about feeling safe and accepted, knowing I can share my struggles and vulnerabilities without being judged. It's about having someone in my corner who believes in me, even when I doubt myself.
That's beautifully said. Supportive friendships offer a sense of belonging, validation, and unconditional love. They're a safe haven where we can be our messy, imperfect selves without fear of rejection. They celebrate our wins and offer a shoulder to cry on during tough times.
It's like having someone you can call at 2 a.m. when you're feeling lost and alone and knowing they'll answer without hesitation. It's about that shared history, those inside jokes and memories that weave together the fabric of your friendship.
And it's about reciprocity. Supportive friendships are a two-way street. It's about showing up for our friends just as they show up for us, celebrating their successes, offering a listening ear when they need it.
Recognizing that our friends have lives and struggles of their own, and being sensitive to that even when we're dealing with our own challenges.
Exactly. Now, I want to circle back to a topic we touched on earlier, jealousy. It's something that can sneak into even the strongest friendships. Why is that? And how do we deal with those feelings in a healthy way?
Jealousy can be so destructive. What are some of the underlying causes?
Often it comes from a place of insecurity or inadequacy. We start comparing ourselves to our friends, focusing on their successes while downplaying our own. Social media definitely doesn't help with this. We're bombarded with images of other people's seemingly perfect lives.
It's like we're comparing our behind-the-scenes footage to everyone else's highlight reel. It's bound to make you feel inadequate.
Exactly. And those feelings can lead to unhealthy behaviors like competitiveness, resentment, even trying to sabotage our friends' happiness. But here's the key. True friends want the best for each other. Their successes don't take away from our own. There's room for everyone to shine.
So how do we shift that mindset? How do we move from feeling like it's a competition to feeling that sense of abundance and genuine support?
It starts with self-awareness. Recognizing those feelings of jealousy as they pop up and figuring out what insecurities might be fueling them. Journaling therapy, even just talking to trusted friends, can help unpack those emotions and challenge those negative thoughts.
So it's about acknowledging that those feelings are normal, but not letting them control our behavior or ruin our relationships.
Exactly. And it's about celebrating our friends' successes, genuinely recognizing that their achievements don't diminish our own worth or potential.
It's like shifting from a me versus them mentality to a we're all in this together approach. Because true friendship is about supporting each other's growth and being happy for each other.
Beautifully put. Now, as we continue exploring the complexities of friendship, I want to touch on something that's often overlooked: the importance of boundaries. What role do boundaries play in having healthy and fulfilling friendships?
Boundaries are so important.
Yeah.
We hear a lot about them in romantic relationships, but I think they're equally crucial in friendships. What are some examples of healthy boundaries we can set with our friends?
Boundaries are about setting clear expectations and limits in the relationship. It's about communicating our needs and preferences in a way that's assertive and also respectful. For example, we might need to set boundaries around our time and availability, making it clear that we can't always drop everything to accommodate a friend's request. Or we might need to set boundaries around emotional labor, making it clear we're not always available to be their therapist or shoulder to cry on.
It's not about being selfish or rejecting their needs, but more about protecting our own well-being and making sure the relationship is balanced and beneficial for both people.
Exactly. We're not responsible for managing our friends' emotions or solving all their problems. We can offer support and empathy, but ultimately each person is responsible for their own well-being.
And those boundaries can change as the friendship evolves, too.
Yeah.
What was acceptable early on might need to be renegotiated later as life circumstances change.
Right. And those conversations can be tough, but they're crucial for maintaining a healthy dynamic. When boundaries are clear and respected, there's less room for resentment, misunderstanding, or hurt feelings.
It all comes back to open communication, mutual respect, and recognizing that both people have the right to express their needs and set those limits.
Absolutely. Now let's talk about something that can be both exciting and nerve-wracking: navigating new friendships as adults. How do we even go about making those connections when we're older?
I think that's a challenge a lot of people face, especially as we get older and our social circles might become more settled. It can be daunting to put yourself out there.
Yeah, it's about being open to new experiences and stepping outside our comfort zones. Maybe joining a club or group related to our interests, volunteering, even just striking up conversations with people we encounter in our daily lives.
So being proactive and creating opportunities for those connections, it's not like they're just going to appear out of thin air.
Right. And being authentic and genuine in those interactions, trying too hard to impress or fit in, can backfire. It's better to just be ourselves and let those connections develop naturally.
So embracing our quirks and letting our personalities shine through.
Exactly. And remember, building friendships takes time. It's about nurturing those connections, sharing experiences, gradually deepening that sense of trust and intimacy.
It's like tending a garden.
Yeah.
It takes time, patience, and consistent care to cultivate those beautiful blooms, but it's so worth it.
I love that analogy. Now, before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with something to think about.
Okay, lay it on us. What's the big question we should be asking ourselves?
Well, think about the friendships that bring you the most joy. You know, the ones that really light you up. What makes those relationships so special? What qualities do those friends embody?
That's a good point. It makes you really stop and think about what you truly value in those close connections. For me, I think it's that sense of loyalty, that unconditional acceptance, knowing I can just be myself, warts and all, and not be judged.
It's so interesting how those core values can differ from person to person, though. Some people might prioritize a shared sense of humor or intellectual stimulation. Others might really cherish those friends who are always there to listen or who bring a sense of adventure to their lives.
And sometimes it's a beautiful mix of all those things. Those friends who can make you laugh until you cry, but are also there to offer a shoulder to cry on when things get rough.
It's about finding those people who complement our personalities and perspectives, right? The ones who challenge us to grow, but also celebrate who we are at our core.
And it's important to remember that friendships, like all relationships, are a two-way street. It's not just about what we receive, but also what we give. It's about showing up for our friends, being present, and offering that same level of support and understanding we hope to receive.
It's about reciprocity, that mutual respect, and that deep sense of connection that makes us feel truly seen and understood.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into the fascinating world of friendship, what's one key takeaway you hope our listeners will hold on to?
I'd encourage everyone listening to reflect on those qualities that make a friendship truly meaningful to them, and then go out and nurture those bonds. Express appreciation to those friends who enrich your life. Make an effort to reconnect with those you haven't spoken to in a while, and be open to new connections that might surprise you.
Because friendships, those genuine human connections, they're essential for our well-being. They bring depth and color and laughter to our lives, and they remind us that we're not alone in this journey.
They really do have the power to transform our lives in the most profound and unexpected ways.
So, cheers to friendships, in all their messy, complicated, and ultimately beautiful glory.
Cheers to that.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the world of friendship. We'll see you next time for another exploration of the human experience. Until then, stay curious, stay connected, and keep those friendships strong.
This is DigitView.